everyone, I'm Jingnan.
And I'm Wu Fan.
Welcome to our new podcast, China Through
Singlasses.
Singlasses. If you don't know who we are or what this podcast is about,
that's exactly why episode 1 is about identity.
We'll be sharing a bit about our backstories and our credentials as to why we claim to be amateur experts on China. So let's begin. So Wu Fan, do you want to tell us about your parents and where they're from?
My dad is from Beijing and my mom is from Xichang, which is part of Sichuan. What about you?
My mom is from Shanghai and my dad is from Wuhan, but we don't speak about him.
Okay.
But I was born in Singapore and raised partly in Shanghai. I spent most of my pre-primary school, like kindergarten days, in Shanghai. What about you?
Okay. Slightly similar, but I was born and raised in Singapore. Went back to Beijing for 1 year when I was 3 or 4 for kindergarten. And then I came back to Singapore because my parents missed me too much. But like looking back at how I grew up, I don't feel like I left the Chinese sphere too much. Because from P4 to P6, I was basically in a Hokkien Huiguan school, which is very, very Chinese. And then in secondary school, which is where we met, and in JC, which is junior college, we were also in Chinese schools essentially.
Yeah.
We
were in a SAP school. We're not going to name which school to protect us and to protect the school. But yes, that's how we met. So
I think we might need to explain what's SAP.
SAP stands for Special Assistance Program.
Plan. Yeah, but it's not really about like financial bursaries and stuff like that. It's like a historical legacy from the government essentially to support Chinese schools.
Yeah. Okay, the backstory is that in Singapore there used to be Chinese schools, and after like PAP took over, they wanted to ensure that there was more like equality amongst the different races, so they wanted to eliminate Chinese schools and implement English language as the first primary teaching language in all schools. As a compromise, because all the Chinese people got really angry, they allowed certain historically Chinese schools to remain parts of their culture, heritage, and legacy, kind of, by labeling them as SAP schools. So in these particular schools, the curriculum is also taught in English, but there tends to be a more stronger emphasis on Chinese culture and history and stuff like that. Yeah, so that's the secondary school that we both went to, and as well as the JC, technically speaking.
Yeah.
So that's kind of our credentials, but I think we have a bit more credentials than just the schools we went to. So let's talk about that. We both actually had the BSP scholarship. It stood for
Bicultural Studies Program.
Wow! I'm already... No, that's not...
You can't remember?
Wait, I'm quite sure Bicultural Studies Program, BSP.
Jeez.
Okay. Yeah, so what is the BSP scholarship?
It's okay, the program is tied to the scholarship. So if you're on the scholarship, you're part of the program. And
vice versa.
Yeah, and okay, the official aim of the program is to groom bilingual and bicultural leaders of the future who are aware, who are able to
with China and Chinese affairs, but it is essentially a very elitist and Chinese-centric.
Are we really doing this?
Yes, we are. We are being brutally honest and sharing our genuine thoughts. So yeah, it is essentially like a very elitist and Chinese-centric scholarship and program to fund SAP school students to be very well-rounded in Chinese, the language, as well as the culture and the country and current affairs. Yeah, so it was very, very exclusive. There were only 100 scholars per year, I think, across Singapore, like all the SAP schools, secondary school. Yeah. So we were both BSP scholars, and we were both part of the program. Yeah. So do you want to explain what kind of came along with the BSP scholar money? Like what were the things that we had to do to sell our souls to the government?
Okay. It's not that bad. We did not sell ourselves to the government. But that being said, some BSP scholars will go on to, join the government service and various embassies and stuff like that. But that's not the whole story. So curriculum-wise, we learned about stuff like... Okay, I remember there were 4 big quadrants. So it's social, political, economic, and international relations. And it's all mostly related to contemporary China. But I know that there are some other SAP schools that also looked at Chinese history and Chinese language, literature. But I don't think our school did that. And in addition to that, I think the biggest drawing point for a lot of people is we get to go to China for 2 months in Sec 3.
Okay,
That was for our school lah.
okay, so basically what the government does is they give each school set amount of money for each student. Let's just say like $1,000, and how the school chooses to use it is up to the school. So the way our school chose to use it was to send us and marketed it was to send us to China for 2 months and to England for 2 weeks. But in other SCP schools, they went to China for 1 month and maybe America or maybe not at all to a Western country. It really depends on how the school decides to spend the money, essentially. But that the going to China as part of like an excursion and learning trip is very much a part of the BSP scholarship and program.
Yeah, it's called immersion lah. So like 进入, you're literally immersing in the culture. You go to the classes with your China buddies, and I think for us, it was a lot of city hopping. So we went to more than just the main cities you think of when you go to China.
Yeah.
Like we also went to like Wuxi.
I don't remember anything.
You don't remember anything? Oh my god! Wait, there was also this city that's the 批发市场 of China.
Oh,
I cannot remember. Okay, there was also Ningbo
and Shaoxing. Is it Shao? No, Shaoxing is the
no.
酒. I'm sorry. If we will lapse into like Mandarin every once in a while in this podcast because we are inevitably talking about China.
Yiwu, Guangzhou.
Yes, Yiwu. We went to Yiwu. Yiwu is not in Guangzhou.
Oh, Yiwu, Guangzhou, other cities and places we went to. Yeah.
Yeah, so we went to a lot of places in China. So that was part of the experience of being in BSP program. The kind of another aspect of it was that we had to write papers in Chinese, like
whole ass research papers. And it's really hard to Google in Chinese because Google is not a thing in China.
Yeah. Yes, we will talk about like Google and other tech giants counterparts in China in upcoming episodes. But yes, we had to write papers in Chinese. So that was all in secondary school, mind you.
And also in JC.
And then afterwards in JC, we actually had to take CSE.
Which is China Studies in Chinese.
Yeah, do you want to explain what China Studies in Chinese is to like people who didn't take the subject?
I mean, it is China Studies in Chinese.
Okay,
it has an English speaking counterpart, which I think is a lot easier.
There's CSE, which is China Studies in English, which is very, like, first of all, it's very rare for people to take CSC. It's even rarer for people to take CFE. But anyhow, basically, it is essentially China Studies. You learn about the Chinese economy. You learn a bit about Chinese history, China social, political, all that kind of stuff. So, in addition to that, we also had to write papers.
Even longer papers.
But
extremely long papers.
Yeah, but I'm going to preface this by saying that I actually did not finish JC. I dropped out. So I only did 1 year of China Studies. Wu Fan, round of applause. Actually finished CSC and sat for the A-levels for that and finished her paper. I did not. I dropped out halfway. So yeah, but okay, that's JC. That's a couple years ago. And for Wu Fan, do you want to talk about your uni like credentials for this?
Okay, well, I majored in sociology. I graduated from uni also. Woo! Okay, so I majored in sociology, and we had quite a lot of area studies in my school's department. And I chose cultural studies as my minor, as well as Japanese studies, because I was thinking, I already have CSC, maybe I won't. I need to build that.
It's okay. We keep everything in this podcast. It is the way it is. But yes, go on.
I was thinking I already have CST, so maybe I'll try something else. So I also did Japanese studies, which is something I'm really interested in. Yeah.
That's her uni credentials. Even though like she's freshly graduated. I am, however, I have just started toiling in my university days.
All the best.
I am majoring in political science and I'm minoring in China studies. Because I'm genuinely interested, yeah. But yeah, so these are our credentials in terms of why we claim to be, knowledgeable to a certain extent on Chinese matters and China as a country in general. But I think a lot of what we talk about draws less on what we have been taught and what we learn in the classroom.
Less
academically, and more things we draw from our personal lived experiences as second generation immigrants. So yeah, talking about second generation immigrants, smooth segue. There's actually a bit of a difference between second generation immigrants and third culture kids. So we were initially thinking of labeling ourselves as as third culture kids, but then we decided against it. So do you want to explain a bit about the differences between the two terms? Or should I? Okay, I did the research for this, so I will do it. So second generation immigrants is, as the name suggests, it means that you are not the first to be fresh off the boat. Your parents are, but you are still considered an immigrant. So as to which generation you stop being an immigrant and actually a citizen, that is up for debate. But essentially that is what it is. Your parents moved to a different country and you grew up in that country. Third culture kids, however, refer to those children who have parents that kind of country hop. So typical occupations include diplomats, people who work in the oil industry and all sorts of stuff, which requires a lot of international traveling. So their children will be considered third culture kids because in their formative years, they never actually settle down in a different country that is different from their culture of origin. So we didn't really identify much with that because it wasn't like we hopped from China to Singapore to America to all sorts of places. We kind of just settled into Singapore and kind of essentially were born and raised here. So that's why we feel like we identify with second generation immigrants more. And you want to elaborate a bit more on why not third culture?
Okay. I think this is quite specific to Singapore. There's a very, very big Chinese majority. So
about 78% is like Chinese.
Yeah, so this is why we're definitely not third culture, even though there are different kinds of Chinese and being Chinese, but I think we don't really feel like we are very, very big of an odd one out at any point in Singapore because of the Chinese majority. And okay, this is a bit of a jump back to uni credentials or whatever, but I just remembered, I don't know why I forgot about this, but for my sociology thesis, I actually wrote about I actually interviewed. Okay, I'll just talk about the people I interviewed. I interviewed people all around the world who identify as second, third gen Chinese immigrants. And when I was calling for interviewees, the people were so enthusiastic about signing up that some of them who identify as 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th gen, they also signed up, which made me realize that no matter how many generations you stay in a different country from where you come from, or rather where your ancestors come from, sometimes you just hold on to the foreigners in you across all the generations.
Yeah.
That
has to do with the diaspora, which we will get to later. But before that, we have to discuss which language we deem as our first language because there's a bit of a difference between the two of us. So do you want to share which language you deem between Mandarin? We both are bilingual. I like
effectively, I would say we are quite high up in the effectively bilingual scale in Singapore. For real. Yeah.
So, but which of the two languages between Mandarin and English do you deem to be your first language?
Okay, my first language is definitely Mandarin because English is something that was hard drilled in me. In fact, my grammar was pretty poor until PSLE when I was like, oh my god, I need to get A+ now. So I really hard drilled grammar. So I feel like if a language is your first language, right, you don't have to like memorize grammar for it. It should come naturally to you because your family or like your immediate environment speaks it so much that it's just ingrained in you. That's how I feel about it. But as of now, because everybody around me speaks English, I almost have no fluently Mandarin speaking friends. So I would say that in terms of speaking, I am sadly more fluent in English now. Yeah, but let's say I am reading something emotional like BL, which means voice love, I would definitely prefer to read it in Chinese because this is the language that's so close to my heart, right? That if I read something emotional, it hits me a lot more. Yeah. Okay. But when I'm thinking, my brain is just a jumble of all the languages I've learned thus far. So it just, goes wherever.
Yeah, for me, it's kind of clear that my current first language is English. Like, I have to admit that when I was young, like when I first came, my first language was obviously Mandarin as well. And during primary school, a lot of my immediate friends spoke Mandarin, so it was primarily Mandarin. But when I got to secondary school and beyond, majority of the people around me were speaking English, that it was just so difficult for me to have an environment where I would be speaking Mandarin or like writing Mandarin outside of like Chinese class. So over the years, I have become like my first language in my mind has transformed from Chinese to English. I now think in English and try I express myself better in English. And I noticed this a few years back, but very very sharply this year when I was trying to vlog in Chinese.
Oh no.
Like I was trying to vlog for my
That's very brave.
no, because I have a vlogging, like I like to vlog my travels.
Like and subscribe.
Stop. I like to vlog my travels to share with family and friends, and I wanted to share with my Chinese family. So I vlogged in Chinese because it would be very difficult for them to understand English. Anyway, I realized in editing, also editing your own videos is an
Pain in
absolute
the ass.
nightmare because you're just forced to you're confronted with like
Your face.
your face and your voice and your mannerisms. It is very painful to look at. Anyway, when I was editing, I realized that while I was speaking Mandarin, a lot of my sentence structures were fundamentally English.
I
like,
totally get it.
yes,
Oh
like
my
I
God.
would, you will understand what I'm trying to say, but grammatically, my Chinese, my Mandarin sentence structure was completely wrong because I was following the English grammar structure. But yeah, so fundamentally, according to Wu Fan, I'm a whitewashed bitch. Yeah,
Drinking
but
Starbucks.
okay, whatever.
Oh wait, but the fact that you said that you might be able to understand what you're saying, even though it's like Chinese, a Mandarin in an English structure, right?
Yeah.
I feel like that could be a very Singaporean thing. Like if Singaporean Chinese people watch your videos, they will understand it totally because they speak like that also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think my relatives understand what I'm trying to say. It's just that if you pit me against a Mandarin speaker in China, it's quite obvious who is grammatically correct.
Yeah,
And that person is not me. We're gonna jump around a bit because we're on the topic of languages, right? Like, do you consider, what is your Chinese language standard? You mentioned that you consider it your first language, right? So you wanna like share in comparison to, like I have mentioned, in comparison to a native Mandarin speaker in China, I would not be as fluent. But what about you? Do you think you hold up?
I definitely do not hold up. Because like only in Singapore do I feel like, wow, I speak Mandarin really well. Because okay, I have seen the Chinese curriculum textbooks in China.
Oh god.
Like their primary school kids are memorizing Shi Jing and all. These are like ancient Chinese poetry texts. And you need to understand a very different structure. Like people in the past speak so succinctly, like one word means like 10 transition. Yeah.
It's like learning Shakespeare in primary school. It's the English equivalent.
Yeah, except I feel like Shakespeare is less succinct than this 文言文古文 stuff. Yeah, and people in China, they really memorize entire texts when they write their essays. So like they're just regurgitating like
we are
famous
talking like
philosophers.
400 to 800 word essays that like again are written in ancient Chinese, which so the 400 to 800 word essay would mean like 1000 to 2000 word in our simple Chinese.
Yeah.
And they have to memorize the entirety of the essay.
Yeah. And they have to understand what it means. Like,
because they'll be tested on it.
Yeah, so in terms of, but here's the thing though, like when we talk about expression and academic argumentation, it's like one aspect of language use, which is also not an everyday language use aspect. Yeah, so I mean you can argue that since it doesn't apply to most of your everyday life, this is not like a very fair comparison. But for me, I hold myself to that standard lah, which I'm not reaching lah. So I would say that, yeah, definitely don't compare to a mainland Chinese person. Oh, but that being said, right, if you think about this in Singapore, everybody learns like standard Mandarin.
Yeah.
But in China, right, there are a lot of people who, okay, maybe not for our generation, but definitely the generation above us, a lot of people who speak their dialects most of their lives, and they might not be very good at 普通话, which is like standard
Mandarin,
Chinese. Yeah, so for example, my maternal grandparents from Sichuan, they speak 川普, which is 四川普通话, which is like a Sichuanese version of standard Chinese that sounds wonky if you don't know what 川普is.
It's like Singlish versus standardized English.
Yeah.
So like by right everyone in China is supposed to speak standardized Chinese. Like how Singapore by right everyone's supposed to speak standard proper English, but everyone tends to speak Singlish. So in different parts of China, people speak different variations of like the standardized Mandarin. So same thing in Shanghai. There is I won't say that, okay, the Shanghai one is kind of recognizable, but it is not as recognizable and famous and hilarious as the Sichuan version of Mandarin. So yeah, like talking about that, a bit about accents. Do you find that you have an accent when you speak Mandarin?
Yes and no. So let's say I'm going to the Cai Fan store, which is mixed veg store in Singapore, right? And I can tell that the auntie is Singaporean. I will like hide my accent completely.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We can continue on that later. But yeah. Okay. But okay. So okay, let's just say that you are.
But in general,
at your most comfortable at ease, do you find that you have an accent?
I do have an accent, but I feel like over the years it's just like disappearing because I've been in Singapore for so long. And when I talk to my Singaporean friends in Chinese on rare occasions where I do, I also kind of mask my accent. So now I just subconsciously do it. And I also have gamer friends from Malaysia with very strong Malaysian accents.
Yes.
So my accent is just everywhere now.
Yeah. I have the same problem. Or yeah, I guess. So I don't. Okay, this is very. I had this discussion with my mother because Shanghai people tend to have this like version of Mandarin, but it's not very pronounced. And the more educated, quote unquote educated you are in Shanghai, right, the less likely you are to have an accent because it's so urban that the accent is actually very, very like faint. My mom doesn't actually have a very strong Shanghainese accent when she speaks Mandarin. So like I guess from there and from other places, I don't have a very strong Shanghainese accent when I speak Mandarin. However, when I speak Mandarin, it is very clear that I am not from China. It is not like I can fake a Malaysian / Singaporean accent, like a very bad one.
Yes.
Like you know how people like pretend to speak British English?
Yeah.
That's me with Malaysian and Singaporean accents.
Oh my god.
But like yeah, so over the years I have learned to kind of like camouflage myself and tune up my Singaporeanness or Malaysianness of the Chinese accent when I speak Chinese, especially when I'm speaking to local Singaporeans, especially older people who are possibly xenophobic.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
That is but I can totally relate to that because I just came back from my trip to Taiwan and then I really, really consciously hold in my mainland Chinese accent so hard because I'm so scared. Like stereo, like so things get very political down there.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yes.
Oh, but another thing is, I think in Singapore, right, the understanding of Chinese accent is Beijing accent.
Yes.
So a lot of people, right, okay, I'm a bit annoyed by this, but a lot of people, they were like, oh, you're from China, then they start like trying to speak in like a Beijing accent by like R-ing everything.
Yes.
So they roll their tongue behind every single word, even though you're not supposed to. And then they also use like very nasal sounds.
Yes.
Then they were like, 我是北京人. Like, you don't put R behind the 京. Wow, I cannot say. Oh my god. I'm calm and collected. I'm fine. But yeah.
Yeah, it is like very China is so big. I think that is one of the key messages that we want to kind of send out there. If you are listening to this podcast and you care, China is so big that honestly, it's not even like a collective country at some points. It's like
it's very diverse.
It's so diverse.
Even in the same prefecture, not prefecture. Sorry,
that's Japanese. Oh my god, my brain is not okay. Even the same like so they have different tiers of how they 县市省 and 城 and basically they kind of categorize different pieces of land according to.
Let's just say even in the same region. People speak differently also. Like over the mountains, different dialect. Yeah. So
it really kind of is very, I won't say annoying, but it kind of like rubs off on you when
people just gloss over it.
Yeah.
I mean like, but that's, how do I say this? Like, in order to know the world, you need to start from stereotypes first. Then you branch out into different things.
Yeah.
But people rarely branch out into different things because Beijing is just so prominent.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
Because the rest of China doesn't really receive a lot of press, I feel like. When you think China, you think Beijing,
then Shanghai.
And that's it.
Yeah, that's very true.
Because like partly because of what I'm against the Chinese government, but partly because of what the Chinese government wants you to know. They control it very, very much tightly. Like they only want you to know the glamorous and urban and modern aspects of China, which is very much Beijing and Shanghai. And also because there's just not a lot of press getting out there in terms of exchange between people online. Because there is we will touch on this like further in future episodes, but essentially the internet doesn't get to know China and the Chinese internet doesn't get to know the rest of the world because there is a giant firewall the internet firewall, so there is no cultural exchanges. So
I wouldn't say no lah.
very limited. And even those who manage to get over the firewall and kind of interact with other people are a specific kind of
They're already
demographic
predisposed to a different mindset.
Yeah. They won't be the rural people. Like Li Ziqi is not actual China, like rural China.
Yeah.
So if you know who that is like kind of very famous Chinese.
She sounds like a farm girl in a pastoral fantasy who can do a lot of things like grow crops from
nothing.
Scratch, make carpentry from scratch, and like make clothes from scratch. She's like can do everything kind of
aesthetics.
Back to basics. Yeah.
But that is not what rural China is actually like.
Yeah.
But anyway, do you want to add something?
No, I was just gonna say that the variance is super big. Like if you think about it, in every Chinese city now, there's like a modern part to it. But the further you spread out from that city, the more rural it gets. And it's just like maybe like hundreds of satellites of this sort throughout China. Yeah.
So now that we have gone really off the rails when we started talking about language, a bit back about, identity and stuff. The core of identity is really about sense of belonging. So, Wu Fan, do you identify as Singaporean or Chinese or both or neither?
Okay, if you're talking about Chinese as an ethnicity or race or just a cultural
like
group.
mainland Chinese.
Oh, mainland?
Do you identify as mainland Chinese?
Okay, no, seriously. Like, for real, I cannot share the same... Okay, let's talk about the overly nationalistic parts of China and Singapore. If I had to choose one camp, I'll be overly nationalistic for Singapore lah.
Oh, really? Okay.
Because, as in, there are so many things about Singapore that I'm proud of, and I'm really, really glad to be here. Like, if I think about a country I want to stay for the long term, it'll be Singapore.
Okay.
But that's also because I've been exposed to all the good parts of Singapore for so long that, like, I'm here. The benefits really buy me in, if that makes sense.
You have been bought over.
Yeah, like for China, I wouldn't say that I'm super fluent in all the social services and all the things at all. So I don't even know what are the frameworks that are there for me. Yeah, and because of my nationality at this point, China is kind of exclusive when it comes to nationality and stuff like that. And also membership in various cities. Especially,
like they gatekeep a lot of things.
Yes. Yeah, and if you think about the governance, I have more faith. I have more faith in the Singapore government. I feel more protected and safe. So I identify as a Singaporean by nationality. I'm still Chinese as a Chinese person. But definitely not mainland Chinese. Yeah.
Okay, so for me, I kind of I definitely do not identify as. Okay, no, I won't say definitely do not.
CCP.
I do not like the Chinese Communist Party by any stretch of the imagination. But not saying that they are complete failures.
They still have their merits.
They have their merits, limited, but sure that they have their merits. I just I think I identify as Singaporean for sure. I've been living here for so long, like
ancient.
But there is still a part of me that, because I think I spent so much time growing up in Shanghai, that is emotionally attached to China, particularly Shanghai, I think. Yeah, so I'm still kind of in limbo. I actually wrote an essay about this when I was like during my first semester this university year.
Nice.
About like my identity and stuff, like migration and diaspora. So I essentially, the title of my essay was Limbo, and the fundamental underlying concept is that I don't identify as either Singaporean or Chinese fully. Kind of a mixture of both. But I guess that kind of tells you where we are both at.
In limbo.
In limbo. Kind of, I think that's what motivated us to start this podcast.
Yeah.
To share our experiences of being in limbo.
Actually, I'm curious. You identify more strongly as Shanghainese than Chinese, right? Would you say that?
Yes.
So let's say if Shanghai is no longer part of mainland China,
that's never gonna happen.
but
China will never let go of their golden egg laying goose. Shanghai is like the biggest port in the entire world right now, and majority of where the Chinese GDP is coming from.
Yeah, but if you think about it, right, your sense of belonging stems from a part of China, but not the entirety.
It's like, how do you identify as it's like saying I identify as somebody from Earth. You know? No. The idea is, why does it sound absurd? It's because it's so broad and vague that you can't actually attach yourself to anything to it.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Because to me, China is so huge and they are so diverse, and there are so many places that I've never been. I can't connect to those places. I'm more grounded in where I grew up and where my childhood memories reside. So that's where I am attached to and what I identify as.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like, you know what I'm trying to say? Like, you can say, oh, I'm from Singapore, or I identify as Asian.
Identify as Bedok resident.
Yeah, but like
none of us stay at Bedok.
The more specific you go, the easier it is for you to grow attached to it.
Yeah, for sure.
Is how I feel about it.
Okay.
So, okay, talking about being second generation immigrant in Singapore, did you experience any xenophobia or racism growing up? Or are you still experiencing xenophobia and racism in Singapore? As the child of Chinese immigrants and technically a second generation immigrant yourself.
Okay, I feel like maybe not flat out xenophobia racism in a very hard sense, but one of them I mentioned just now is the accent thing. It's like, would you consider this microaggression? You know, like, offense is a two-way thing. If you don't take offense, it might not be offensive, all that. But yeah, so one thing could be like the language. Another thing is my name only has 2 characters. So when I was younger, people made fun of that, which is very stupid. Okay, but kids will always be stupid lah, if you think about it. So I don't fault them for being stupid. But in the past, I really wanted an English name to make things easier, because there are people who pronounce my name as Wu Fan, which means lunch. Which means lunch in Chinese.
I never realized that. Never realized that.
Oh my god, you're a good human lor. Thank you. There's also Hor Fan and Ma Fan. Yeah, but
actually they purposely called you that to make fun of your name.
Yeah.
Oh god.
But it's like, I don't know whether it's just it might not be me being a Chinese person. It might just be my name, you know?
Yeah.
But the fact that my name only has 2 characters really stood out to them. As I mean, to me it's damn cool. You know, when we shade OAS, all the people with like 30 characters in their name, they just cry.
Okay, that's low-key racist because people with longer names tend to be ethnic, like
no,
ethnic
not true. Not true. Might also be like Elizabeth, Marinette, Alexandra. Like this kind of...
There are also ethnic minorities in Singapore.
Yeah.
Anyone that is not Chinese is ethnic minority in Singapore.
But those 3 character Chinese name plus English name people are Chinese also, what?
True. Okay. Maybe I'm thinking too much.
Yeah. Stop thinking.
I will try to stop thinking.
But yeah, so when I shade OAS shit, I just laugh back at them. Okay. Yeah, but now I'm super proud of the beauty of my Chinese name, because if you write it out right, it's symmetrical left to right.
Define symmetrical left to right.
Like mirror image left to right. Like Wu is 口天 is mirror image.
Oh, okay. The actual Chinese characters, because I was thinking the English alphabet, and I was like, how is it in any way symmetrical left to right?
It's a Chinese lah. So it's a very intelligently thought out name. Okay, take that, haters.
Okay. Thank you, Miss Wu, for your very passionate and riling rant. Okay. Yeah, but for me, I think it was slightly different. I did experience my share of, I would not say, I hesitate to call it xenophobia because I had the same problem as you. I was not a very likable child.
Oh, that's not my problem.
Is it too late to like stop recording and leave this podcast? No, I was not a very likable child. The problem I had is not the fact that I was not a likable child. The problem I had was that children will be children and they will find something to pick on you for.
Exactly.
Because I was not very well liked, they love to pick on me. And one of the things that they picked on me for was being Chinese, like being from China. So they'll call me China girl. And laugh about it. And they didn't call me China girl in the she's from China, like in a matter of fact tone. They called me China girl in a derogatory manner. But I mean, to be fair, I was obnoxiously Chinese back then. Like I was very, very proud of my heritage and stuff, but it just made me stand out in all the wrong ways lah. Like I was already not very popular and well liked, and then I was a very easy target for them. I gave them all the materials to make fun of me. So I was called China girl in primary school all the time, and then it stopped when I got to secondary school because
our school is full of
Chinese people. But
Chinese scholars, second-gen Chinese people.
Yeah, but like it didn't. I won't call it xenophobia, but the subtle like, oh, you're from China, your Chinese must be very good. Can you help me do this? Like
oh my god, that's damn ass. And also Chinese means math good. Our math both suck.
Yeah, like in Mandarin class, in Chinese class, it's always like, can you like can you answer teacher's question? Or your Chinese very good, right? I mean, yes, my Chinese was good. And yes, I am from China, but like, you know, it kind of eats away at you a bit after a while. The other, outside of school, the other instances of like racism and xenophobia I experienced was more of like a fear. So what happens is I would interact with Singaporeans, local Singaporeans, and talking about primary school, I had a social studies teacher.
Oh no.
She was in her 50s, I think, 50s or 60s. Hilarious like sidetrack about her. She never actually taught social studies. So what she would do is that she would make us take out our workbooks and then write down the kind of model answer and made us copy it for like the first 10 minutes of a 1 hour class, and the rest of the time she would just spend time telling us about her family stories, like her husband going on a trip, her kids, and all that kind of
That's social studies to her
that's social studies
family biography. Okay.
Yeah, so this is the kind of teacher she was, and one of the topics that she loved to talk about was how terrible things that are made in China are.
Oh my god.
In terms of quality.
No.
And she would well, I remember very distinctly one lesson she was saying, you know, my laptop, and then like she was talking about her laptop for whatever reason. She said, these days laptops just aren't the same. They used to be made in America and the quality was much better. Now everything is made in China and they don't last a single year. And not everyone in class, so the people that tend to bully me in class were all like snickering and looking at me. And I was just like, yes, it was not very pleasant. So I kind of grew very defensive in a sense that when I interact with Singaporeans, local Singaporeans, you don't know what their attitude towards mainland Chinese people are.
Sure.
It's really like a blind guess or a gamble. So in order to avoid any unpleasant kind of interactions, I just mask that fact, that part of myself, I try to blend in to sound Singaporean or like act. I mostly sound Singaporean and not kind of give away the fact that I am from mainland Chinese. I remember what was it? It was for like community service in secondary school. We went to an old folks' home. It was like Lions Befrienders or something along those lines. Always. And one of the elderly asked me, do you speak dialect? And I said no, because I didn't want to go down the rabbit hole. And then she said, what dialect do you speak or something like that? And I said Hokkien to blend in.
Oh no!
And then, okay, if you're not aware, majority of Singaporean Chinese people are Hokkien or Cantonese or Teochew.
Yeah, these three.
Yeah, and some Hakka, but mostly these three. And the most prominent one and common one being Hokkien. So I just said Hokkien because my actual dialect is Shanghainese, which would immediately give off the fact that I'm not, Singaporean. Yeah, so I remember my friend who was partnered up with me to, speak with this one particular elderly lady. She was very nice. She just looked at me confused because she didn't understand why. Since when do you speak Hokkien? She didn't understand why I was lying, but I didn't bother to explain it. Yeah, but that kind of always stuck with me. The hiding. Yeah, I still kind of subconsciously and unconsciously do that sometimes. But it's a protective mechanism more than anything else. It kind of saves you a lot of explaining. And oh god, okay, speaking of names, I don't know if you've ever experienced this. My surname is Yang, and in Singapore, if your dialect is Hokkien, it would be spelled as Yo, Y-E-O instead of Y-A-N-G.
Which is a canned drink in Singapore also.
Yes, and like I've been, I won't say caught out, but I have had people ask me, are you from China because of your surname?
Mine also.
Yes. Yeah. So I was literally, this was a relatively recent encounter. This was this year. I was in a Grab and I was not in a, long story short, I was in a very frantic mode because I needed to get from one place to another.
You're in a Grab lah.
I'm in a Grab, yeah. And the Grab driver out of nowhere just asked me, so which part of China?
Wow.
No, genuinely, there was no like sentence before this, and there was no sentence after this.
FBI open up,
and it was just so which part of China? And I was so genuinely confused, and I was like, I'm sorry, what? And then he said, which part of China are you from? And I was like already not in the mood for this conversation normally, extra not in the mood right now. So I just said, oh, I'm not from China, I'm Singaporean.
Oh shit.
And then he said, but your surname is Yang. And I was like, okay. And then he said, I've only met one person in Singapore whose surname is Yang. Normally it's Yo or something like that. And I was like, and I didn't really have the, mood or heart to kind of continue this conversation. I just told him I'm Singaporean. Which in hindsight, I don't know if that's the right thing to do, but like I was just because you never know. If they ask you, are you from China? It could be a friendly, are you from China? Or it could be a, are you from China?
And sometimes it's not, you really don't have the energy in you to correct or educate people about stuff.
Yeah, so it kind of, like, my name is a dead giveaway.
Yeah, same thing. I get it. I suddenly remember, my name also. But, I had this, like, instant savage response to the driver. Because he said he only met one other person. It's a he, right?
Oh, yeah.
He only met one other person whose surname is Yang, right? You just say, you haven't met enough people in your life.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it really is like, it be like that.
Actually, your social studies, I also have a social studies anecdote.
Oh god, yeah.
So in P4, right, we had this social studies assignment called Do My Family Tree.
Oh god.
Yeah, and the thing is, right, in China, because of the one child policy, people tend to have pretty small family trees. Yeah. So when I handed in my family tree that basically only had like 10 people in like the immediate family tree, the teacher thought I didn't put in effort to find out who my family members are because I have so little family members. I was like, what the hell? Yeah, and another thing was, everybody brought like an artifact from their parents' childhood. But my parents are like not
immigrants.
Even in their home country.
Yeah,
so I didn't have an artifact. So that's also a sign of me not putting in effort to do my family tree. But it's kind of sad that a social studies teacher is not aware of.
Can I just I fully agree with everything you just said. Like this is a complete tangent, but I just want to say, when I was in primary school, there's this organization in Singapore that I do not really like called Dads for Life.
DADS?
DADS, like
Dads
like father, life. Like father.
Okay.
Dads for Life, and they organized a competition basically asking you to write an essay about your father. Basically, they were advocating for fathers to be more present in their children's life, and for children to be more appreciative of their fathers, which in theory sounds like a very wholesome and harmless kind of motive and like mission for an organization. I mean, it's like very family oriented and wholesome. I'm not very sure if they are related to any religion or like they have any ties to religious organizations. Yeah. I'm not very sure, just prefacing that out there.
Okay.
But yeah, like they had this writing competition amongst primary school students, and my dad is not in my picture, not in the picture for me. So it was very difficult because I did not really want to tell people that my parents are divorced. Yeah, because that's another thing that they made fun of me for.
Oh my god!
So I just had to write a fake essay about my dad.
You can imagine. Okay, write about your mom, then you replace all the nouns.
I wrote a mixture of all the male figures in my life, along with like my mom and stuff like that. I wrote an essay for an imaginary person. And the worst part is, apparently my writing was good enough that my teacher selected it and read it to the entire class, and I started crying.
No! Oh my god, it must be so traumatic.
It was very traumatizing. Yeah, so I feel like in an effort to advocate for certain things, people forget to be inclusive sometimes.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, like they need to find ways to like.
There's always a nuclear family assumption in Singapore.
Yes, and in like the heteronormative nuclear family assumption and trope is pushed on all of us in society collectively. I'm sure outside of Asia and Singapore, but it's just not very pleasant sometimes to assume people live the same way that you do.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially if you're a social studies teacher, you should know better. But then again, let's not get into social studies and how unqualified they are, like health education. My health education was taught by my math teacher.
Mine was Chinese teacher. 那都是体育老师教的。I'm dead.
Yeah, but okay, anyway, let's not get into the Singaporean education system. Yes. Okay, so talking about identifying as whether or not you identify as Chinese, do you feel like there is a shame attached to being from mainland China? We recently both like went overseas. We just got back from our trips. Like I went to Japan.
I went to Taiwan.
Yeah. So do you want to talk about if there is a shame that's been attached to just being from mainland China, even if you're not residing in mainland China?
Okay, I think it depends on how xenophobic the social environment I'm in is. So when I was in Taiwan, obviously people are not a fan of mainland China at all. And I remember there was this driver who was driving us from the restaurant back to our Airbnb, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was he's a very like straightforward person lah. But he was also saying, he loves driving Singaporean and Malaysian tourists because they are just like Taiwanese people. They're very like straightforward, want to say something. Like he wanted to say, if you walk from here to there, you might walk until you die. Which is like a very straightforward and funny thing lah, in Singaporean also. But he said that when he drives mainland Chinese people who are just here to, throw money around and act like they're the big boss, and like they're not like very conscientious about the stuff they say, and they are too fake. He kept saying a lot of these things.
Derogatory things.
Sometimes he doesn't identify the people that he's describing as mainland Chinese, but he'll be like, 懂的都懂, that kind of stuff. Like if you know, you know. So yeah, at those moments I just like nervous laughter because the friends I were with, they know that like my friends are mainland Chinese. They look at me, they're like, oof, oh shit. But yeah, on that note though, I feel like some stereotypes exist for a very good reason.
Yeah,
and a lot of the negative cases of mainland Chinese tourists overseas are so negative that the extreme examples just cover all the other types of nicer, more reflexive tourists from mainland China that can be. So in those cases, I would say that I feel ashamed for the mainland Chinese people who have created this stereotype. I don't feel ashamed of being mainland Chinese myself. Yeah, I feel a second-hand shame on
second-hand embarrassment,
yeah, on their behalf. Yeah, that's how I feel. But I think my experience is a bit different from yours growing in Singapore in the sense that I don't really mask my Chineseness because okay, I grew up in a very Chinese environment. Even my primary school is a Hokkien Huiguan school. So it had, my bicultural studies program started from P4. So yeah, and like for me, being Chinese was a source of pride because people look to me as like some beacon of Chinese knowledge, that kind of stuff. And like I feel very validated by my Chinese grades. So I know that it can be annoying if people depend on you to like give answers in Chinese class, right? But in my head, it's a give or take because I depend on them for science and math. So it's a mutual exchange with my group mates.
Do you know I did that in primary 1? Because my English was so god awful in primary 1. What happened was for spelling, in Mandarin class it would be 听写. I was sitting next to this boy. He would he would cheat off my answers for Chinese spelling, and I would cheat off his answers for English spelling. And it was
Why are you sharing this? Oh my god!
It was like an agreement and a contract between the two of us, and we will both get full marks on both.
Wow, stonks eh.
Until we got caught one day. Yeah, it was going well for us until it didn't.
You were very smart and very dumb at the same time.
Yes, correct. We were P1. We were like 7. So I feel like
that's quite amazing.
It was human cooperation at its finest. if I must say so myself.
You know what they say, eggs together strong. Wait. Okay, this is not a personal anecdote, but I suddenly remembered there's something I wanted to say about shame as a mainland Chinese person, which is, like we consider our Mandarin speaking standard to be quite high in Singapore, but I know that there are a lot of second-gen Chinese immigrant kids, right, who grew up not speaking Mandarin at all at home, and they are so bad at the language that they have to take it at H1 level, which is like a lower level in JC. Yeah, and stuff like that. And I know that, I've heard from them that sometimes it's because their parents feel like, okay, they need to push them into an English-speaking environment ASAP. Because there's a certain shame attached to not being able to wield English well as compared to holding on to your, Chinese background. So
I feel like that's the vibe I get from a lot of Chinese immigrants in the Chinese diaspora, especially in Western countries. So if you see like ABCs, like American-born Chinese, the majority of them cannot speak Mandarin to save their own life.
They speak with a stereotypical white people accent.
Yes. Which is they kind of pronounce the words correctly, but the intonations are all over the place.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, it kind of really depends on, because I think why we manage to speak Chinese quite well and why a lot of second generation immigrants in Singapore tend to do okay in Mandarin is because Singapore is a Chinese majority country. Even if you are not from mainland China, even if you are genuinely born and bred Singaporean, that a lot of them don't speak English, like the older generation. And if you have grandparents and stuff, you would speak a bit of Mandarin. So I think that, and also the fact that, mother tongue lessons are compulsory in primary school and secondary school, kind of really sets you up for an environment that at least some people speak Mandarin. Because I can imagine if you're in America and you're born Chinese, you're ethnically Chinese, you have nowhere to speak Chinese unless you go to Chinatown. And
Chinese school.
Yeah, Chinese school or Chinatown, like, and they don't even speak Chinese, they speak like Cantonese. So yeah, like it really is. I think with learning language, it's very much heavily dependent on the environment. Yeah.
Oh, I suddenly remember. Okay, sometimes I will draw from anecdotes from my interviewees.
Yeah.
Yeah. So some of my interviewees mentioned exactly what you said. Like they grew up in quite stereotypically white people countries. They don't have chances to speak Mandarin. And another thing is sometimes there are very strong Taiwanese communities.
Yes.
Or like specific regional group communities. So you really have to be part of that region in order to belong at all. Whereas in Singapore, Chinese sometimes just means Chinese.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's not a lot. I think it's more prominent in diasporas.
So for sure.
Because a lot of let's put it this way, not everyone in China is equally capable of immigrating.
Yeah.
It's not like Singapore where if you live in Bedok and if you live in Jurong, there's no difference. If you live in Shanghai versus if you live in Guizhou, which is two very different places, the chances of you having the opportunity and the finances and the resources to migrate to another country is vastly different. Like if you look at historically, a lot of the people along the Canton region, which is like Cantonese speaking areas like Guangzhou, Hong Kong, these kind of places, and also the more
nearer to the
coastal regions
managed
to immigrate because first of all they're along the coast with easier access to transportation as compared to if you're in from Tibet and like
landlocked places.
And that's the first. Geographically, that's one point. Secondly, economically, these regions tend to be much more well off. So a lot of the Chinese diasporas in Western countries or in other countries tend to typically be from a specific region of China as compared to all over China. Like if you look at Singapore, the Chinese diaspora or the Chinese ethnic Chinese population in Singapore is primarily from the Fujian province. Yeah. And like you can argue like the Chaozhou, Fujian, Guangzhou, these three, like, which is essentially the coastal regions. Yeah. Like historically, if you look at the population across the rest of Southeast Asia for that are ethnically Chinese, it has the same reflection.
Basically came here.
Yeah, that's how it is. So you won't see a very strong like Beijing or like northeastern Chinese community in other places, in other countries, because they typically just don't migrate. Historically at least.
And also because in Beijing people are they think that they're in the best place in the whole world already. My dad thinks so for sure.
Yeah, so why would I move? I'm already it's like Americans, so why migrate? I'm already in the best country in the world.
Exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, I agree with everything you said so far. So moving on to like diaspora, right? Basically the idea of diaspora is the spread and dispersion of people from their original homeland. So it used to refer to the Jewish population because they were forced out of their homeland, current day Israel, historically multiple times over the course of history. But it has since expanded to include other populations. So other populations that have seen mass migrations include China, include India, and a lot of other populations. But these two are the ones on the top of my head. So, do you consider yourself a member of the Chinese diaspora?
I mean, yeah, by definition, yes.
Yes, yeah. Yes, by definition, yes. Do you think that? For me, I guess, it's kind of similar to the question of do you identify as a mainland China, as someone who is from mainland China? I kind of do and kind of don't, because the 4 factors that contribute to the term diaspora is collective transfer, which means like you collectively migrate, collective memory of homeland, and then the will to survive as a minority and to sustain your position over time. So for me, these 4 are not very prominent in my life. Usually diasporas tend to have a very strong community. I have a little bit of memory in Singapore interacting with other Chinese migrants, but not very strongly. It's not like in America where you go to Chinatown and everyone is an immigrant and you immediately feel immersed as, okay, I'm a part of Chinese diaspora. Does that make sense? Because like the China immigrant, like I'm sure there's a community in Singapore, but I was not very involved in that. I think it might be different for you, right?
No comment. Okay. So I grew up in I would guess. Okay. Okay, this draws back to my mom's history. So my parents met in uni, Chinese language majors, ended up being teachers. My mom got invited by Singapore government to come to Singapore to teach Chinese. Yeah, and so our social circle is all the teachers who got invited by China to teach Chinese. Yeah, and essentially all their kids are second generation immigrants like me. And when we grew up, we really spoke very accented Chinese. Yeah, but the thing with like definitions, like, okay, the thing with adjectives in definitions, right, is that they cannot capture the entirety of something. So for example, collective transfer, okay, yes. Collective memory of homeland. Like, in the first place, what kind of collective are you referring to? Because China is very diverse. Yes. And also people forget things over time, especially kids. Yeah. Like, you can completely, okay, I wouldn't say wipe off, but you can completely, like, change your perception of your past when you reach a certain age because you just cannot remember certain things. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I don't, so I guess for that, the both of us do not really strongly identify as members of the Chinese diaspora in Singapore. And then talking about, like, the inevitable, like, elephant in the room, what is the difference between Singaporean Chinese people and mainland Chinese people? Because if you're, like, from a different country, you might not get the nuances. Because you hear the word Chinese and you're like, they look Chinese, they speak Mandarin. What is the difference between a born and raised, like, normal, I won't say normal, like a local Singaporean who happens to be ethnically Chinese and someone who is from mainland China? So what are the significant differences? Do you feel like there are significant differences, and if so, what?
I think the difference really depends on how long the mainland Chinese person has been here, and how many non-mainland Chinese people are part of their social circle.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, okay, this is a matter of, like, assimilation and also personal identity. Sometimes you need to ask them themselves how they feel about things. But let's say you're trying to, like, judge as a complete foreigner, right? I think the way people speak Mandarin is quite different in Singapore versus in mainland China. Excellent, so language is one thing. I had this discussion with some friends. They feel like mainland Chinese have mainland Chinese face. Which Yes, right?
On that, I've been asked several times growing up, are you from China or are you not Singapore? Like, where are you from? Because you don't look Singaporean. Have you experienced that?
No, I think I have very everyday face. Like, I have everybody face. So.
I think, like, relating back, the reason why certain people look mainland Chinese as compared to Singaporean Chinese is because, like we mentioned just now, majority of Singaporean Chinese are migrants from
southern part of China. Southern
coastal China. Yeah. And it is the rest of China can look a bit different. Yes. I know this sounds a bit jarring to people, but there are 56 races in China, and, like, even the ethnically Han population in different parts of China look different. So the people in southern China tend to be shorter, tanner, darker,
flatter noses,
flatter features
in general,
and, like, slimmer, like, just smaller build, whereas, like, northern China, northern eastern China, they tend to be bigger and, like, broader build, and also, like,
the double eyelid count increases.
The double eyelid count.
It's also because of Russian influence and Mongolian influence.
Mongolian. Yeah. I won't say influence as much as, like, bloodline.
Yeah, bloodline for sure.
Definitely like a 23andMe kind of thing. Yeah. So I don't. And the thing is, I'm not even like from northern China. Like, between the two of us, you are more northern China. You have half of Beijing blood. I'm from Shanghai, which is from southern China coastal region, albeit not from the three major city areas that Singaporean Chinese are usually from. But I think my face is just a little bit more different than...
You have quite a sharp nose.
Yeah, my nose ridge is higher. And also, I'm a bit tanner than, like, the average person. I guess so.
I guess?
I've had people, like, no joke, I've had this Malay lady look at me and say, like,
Are you Malay?
And then I said, no, I'm Chinese. And I'm not saying it in an offended way. I just said, no, I'm Chinese. Like, I just clarified. And she looked at me and, like, no, you look Malay. Damn. She insisted I was Malay. And I was like, I'm so sorry to disappoint you, but I really am not.
Maybe to her there's a certain melanin count. Once you hit it, you're Malay.
So, like, I was genuinely confused. I've been mistaken for other races that are not Chinese. Like, several times, not a lot, but several times. Yeah, so...
Okay, but say real, in Singapore, a lot of race people from X race look like people from Y race. In Singapore, you tend to get confused quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, I think the CMIO like model is outdated, and that's another topic for another day, but I just think that the differences are really not as extreme as you think they are. A lot of the times that people look racially ambiguous.
Another thing is there's a certain kind of China makeup.
Yes.
Okay, not the Douyin kind. That one is a different generation already. My mom's generation had a specific makeup style, and if someone does that, I know it's a Chinese person.
Tattooed brows and the tattooed eyeliner.
And a specific red color lipstick. Yes, it's a very Chinese kind of makeup.
Yeah.
But I think it only applies to like 40-plus-year-old mainland Chinese now.
Yeah. Okay, what were we talking about? Oh yeah, the differences between like
okay, so we covered
Chinese,
language, physical appearance.
Okay, now we have to move to like attitudes.
Okay.
What Singaporean Chinese people think of mainland Chinese and vice versa.
Wow, this is hard to say. Okay, but here's the thing. I can't really generalize mainland Chinese as, they have a more positive attitude towards China, because a lot of the reasons why people even get out of a certain country is because they don't like the previous country. So when it comes to attitudes, I can't really generalize for sure. Like, I can't really count on comparison. But one thing I know is like the kind of social media they use and the kind of information that they get is slightly different. Because
very different.
Yeah, mainland Chinese people tend to have WeChat accounts, and they might still use their Weibo.
Yeah.
So they are privy to a lot more information
from China.
Yeah. And one thing I know is I feel like Singaporeans still think of China as kind of backwards. It's a bit ironic. Okay, because
they do. I'm not saying that China is backwards. I'm saying that I agree with you that Singaporean Chinese people think that China is backwards.
Yeah, which is like, I feel like China is going into two extremes, which is like the rich and the educated are like obviously going for like a lot of technology and upgrading their lives in every single way, whereas like the poor sometimes still get left behind, no matter how much 扶贫政策 there is. Yeah, which is like the government's way of alleviating poverty. So if you travel to China and you don't go off the beaten trail, you only see the modern stuff and you'll be like, wow, China is so modern and everything. But yeah, so okay, let's say Singaporeans who have been to China versus Singaporeans who have not. Yeah, so Singaporeans who have not probably will just stick to the like backwards conception, even though the news reports a lot about China's new technological developments. That's the irony, I think.
Okay, interesting thing about news and stuff like that. Okay, I want to kind of touch on the Singaporean Chinese attitude towards China, because it is kind of two extremes. There are people who are ethnically Chinese in Singapore who are not say pro-China but have a liking towards China, and then on the other extreme there are people who genuinely have a very strong distaste for mainland Chinese people, and it's kind of hilarious that these two extremes are more extreme than other races in China. Other races in Singapore is what I've noticed. So but okay, like there's another like whole bag to unpack. The kind of general senses I get is the older you are, the less kind of open-minded or educated you are in touch with the rest of the world, the more negative your perception of China tends to be if you are Singaporean. So how do I put this? Like okay, so Singaporean Chinese, they tend like the extreme ones, those who are xenophobic particularly, tend to think of China as like mainland China, backwards, uneducated, uncivilized, human rights issues, uncivilized. CCP, think of all, like they just
CCP just overrides all other positive things you can think about.
All other aspects of China is just overwritten by CCP.
Yes.
And it's kind of, I won't say hilarious, but it's kind of like jarring just how different reality is from what they think China is. Does that make sense? So when I was doing like research for my paper about being a Chinese immigrant, and us talking to my mom, they just those who are very xenophobic in Singapore just don't like people from mainland China because they view them as immigrants who are here to steal their jobs.
Yes.
And I also think that's kind of where the perception of them being like it's the same problem that they have with other immigrants. So like people from Bangladesh or people from India, they tend to think that, oh, they are like not educated, they are backwards, they are loud, and all these kind of negative connotations because they tend to associate them with immigrants and they are already xenophobic.
Just lumping them into one.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. And apparently the media plays a very big part in this because there are media outlets in Singapore which kind of, I not say exacerbate, but they kind of report on these conflicts between mainland Chinese immigrants and Singaporeans, and it kind of, the news coverage gets blown out of proportion and sensationalized and kind of furthers the conflict. Apparently in the 1980s or 1990s, around there, when my mom first came to Singapore, there was this widespread term for for mainland Chinese girls who have come to Singapore. They are called 小龙女.
Oh yes.
So basically it translates little dragon girl, but it's a character from a very famous novel series. Basically it's like the Chinese derogatory term for like gold diggers and like kind of prostitutes. So they kind of like it's kind of telling how Singaporeans view Chinese people, like mainland Chinese people, as kind of money hungry, job stealing immigrants, you know. So I mean, of course, we're not generalizing, saying that every single Singaporean thinks of mainland people like that, mainland China people like that, but you know, there is a proportion of Singaporeans who hold on to that view. And yeah, it's kind of interesting to see I mean, would you allocate it more to xenophobia, or would you allocate it more to China genuinely being like that? Like, is it a xenophobia problem where they have this perception towards all immigrants, or is it specifically just China?
Okay, I feel like sometimes when I answer your questions, right, I just hold on to a very empathetic view towards every perspective.
Sure. That's a sociology student in you
that's
speaking.
a sociology student. So I always feel like every stereotype has a good reason. I mean, maybe not a good reason as in like
has
it's
a
valid.
reason.
Yeah, it has a reason. Yeah. So the gold digging is a very negative term, but like money-mindedness, I think is still very prevalent even now.
I mean, to be fair, they come here for a reason, which is to earn money.
Yeah, money is a very survival term because of our capitalistic society where if you have no money, you can't survive. Especially for an immigrant, if you don't have money, you kind of have nothing. Yeah, and in Singapore, you really need to put in effort to get your shit together before the government helps you with anything. Yeah.
Especially if you're an immigrant, the government is going to help you.
But I feel like this xenophobia, right, in Singapore is like, it also partially stems from how much anxiety everybody has. Because social studies comes back in. Since primary school, we are taught that, Singapore is land scarce, resource scarce, everything also scarce. And the only thing we have is talent. But now when the Chinese talents come in, then our talent go where?
They get displaced.
So it's that kind of anxiety that creates the xenophobic sentiment. But I'm definitely not saying that the xenophobic sentiment is valid. But
there's a reason behind it.
Sometimes it's the circumstance law, like
I get what you're saying. It really comes down and boils down to context, which I think hopefully, I don't know who is listening to this. Like,
I am.
I think whatever we describe of like people's stereotype towards immigrants or like Chinese immigrants in particular might be prevalent in other countries as well. Like I watched a little bit of like movies and film and read a little bit about like history. Even in UK, the English are very xenophobic against like the rest of the four kind of countries in UK, which is especially like people from Ireland. Like early days, like basically there was a mass migration of Irish people looking for jobs because of a lot of historical context. They would go to urban places like England, like seeking a job and seeking to better circumstances to build family and build life around there. So a lot of people in England are very xenophobic towards Irish people, Scottish people, I think also. Basically anyone who is not English. I think
is there a specific southern British kind of sentiment? The more urban areas,
definitely like London and stuff like that, definitely. So I think it's a common theme and like kind of running track amongst all nations, especially like those that are more developed and urban. Okay, enough of the heavy stuff.
I do have a not heavy thing. Positive sentiment, but it's also a bit laden in a historical political conflict. NTU.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yes. Go on.
So NTU is a university in Singapore. It's called Nanyang Technological University. But in its early days, it's not very much technological lah.
It is not technological right now either.
Yeah, but I don't really know where the name came from. But there's this group of people, maybe they're like 50, 60-year-old now. It's a very, very strong Chinese educated group of people who do like calligraphy and they meet up. And in the past, they had some communist ties, and Singapore did not have a very happy history with communism. So it was not a very happy history there. But this group of people are still quite pro-China, and they have so much love for the language and the culture, and it's astonishing. If I think about it, right, if I compare myself to a Singaporean person, then their Chinese standard is way, way, way higher than mine. This is the group of people who memorize ancient Chinese texts.
Yeah, I agree. So, okay, but this group of people tend to be like the older generation.
Yeah, it's the older generation
like,
already lah.
50s or 60s, like basically before Nanyang Technological University became NTU, when it was still Nanyang University, I think.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, so it used to be a Chinese-speaking university, and then because Singapore wanted, Lee Kuan Yew wanted all schools to be English language
for
dominant,
like global power,
whatever
concerns,
colonialism. You get it?
Oh no.
Yeah, so there are to this day still a lot of people who are very salty and bitter about the fact that NTU became NTU, which is so. It used to be a Chinese-speaking university. Now it is an English-speaking university.
It feels like they lost their home, kind of.
Yeah. I mean, I understand where they're coming from, but those I would say like are a very small minority of the Singaporeans.
I just suddenly remember that. Yeah, it's a group.
Yeah, on to less heavy and dense and sad topics. A little bit about like, I guess like small culture shocks or like kind of fun things that we notice between Singaporean Chinese people and like mainland Chinese people.
Okay.
So the first thing is really minor, but it's so hilarious to me. Okay, how do you say spoon in Mandarin?
I say two things lah. 勺子, which is the standard Chinese Beijing way, and then my Sichuanese side will be say 瓢根.
But how do Singaporean Chinese people say it?
汤匙.
Oh my god, I'm so sorry. Who in their right mind says 汤匙? Like,
people who only use 汤匙 for soup lah.
But I've never had the kind of chance to speak. Like, I speak in Mandarin to regular Singaporeans, but I just don't know why the word spoon has never like come across in any of the conversations until like a couple years back when I was in a restaurant with my friends, and then I was like, how do you guys say spoon in Mandarin? And then they were like, they looked at me, then they said 汤匙, and I was like, what? Because all my life I've been calling it 条根, which is, I think, a direct translation from Shanghainese, which is not very common in a lot of China. Like, have you heard 条根 before?
Yes and no, because I've been to Shanghai.
Yeah, so like, I don't know. It's just very like the small things. Also, like I don't like certain words. They just call it different. Like they don't say 洗澡, they say 冲凉.
Oh yeah. I remember last time. Okay, this is a bit annoying. Last time I was like unnecessarily corrected for my language use by a 菜饭 auntie.
What did she say?
Like, I was asking for 菜花, which means broccoli, cauliflower. Then she said, "Oh, this is 西兰花."
Oh my! Wait. Okay, wait.
What the heck?
Okay, wait. No. She's correct.
I get what you mean, but we just call it 绿菜花, 白菜花.
No, okay. I am with the cai fan auntie on this one. 菜花 is cauliflower. Broccoli is 西兰花. You cannot call them the same thing. As in, okay, maybe you can, maybe it's okay,
it's a regional difference.
It's a regional difference.
Shanghai person.
Okay, this will be coming up in our future episodes as well. The constant conflict and rivalry between different regions in China. Like, I don't understand northern people who call every single type of vegetable like
青菜 or like 绿菜 or some shit.
Yes, they call every type of vegetable 青菜, and it's just so jarring to me. Another thing that I really, really hate, this is less on Singaporean.
We are doing northern versus China.
We are
southern,
northern versus southern China right now.
Yeah.
番茄. I call it 番茄. People call it 西红柿. When I was in Beijing and I was ordering at a restaurant, I said 番茄牛肉面 and which is tomato, beef noodles. Yeah, and the cashier, who was a young girl, genuinely looked at me like, what are you saying? Like, she said, what do you order? And I said the same thing again, which is 番茄牛肉面. And she said, I don't understand what you're saying. And then I realized, and I said 西红柿, which is another term for tomato. It's like tomato and tomato.
Yes.
And then she finally understood. And I was like, it's not that deep.
No, but I think 番茄, right, is really something Beijing people have never heard of before. My grandma also don't know.
Another thing, 马铃薯 and 土豆. I refuse to call it 马铃薯.
马铃薯 sounds very weird. I say 土豆 also.
Yeah, it's 土豆. So like, it's just very hilarious to me. And also, these kind of subtle differences are also transported to Singapore, because I saw a video of JJ Lin being interviewed by CNA.
Oh my.
And he was saying that when he went over to Taiwan, because that's where his career started, and then he kind of experienced certain difficulties. First of all, his Mandarin is god awful. His words, not mine.
Survivable lah.
No, god awful. People ask him like, how long have you been in Taiwan? It's like one of his first interviews, he was on 康熙来了. People asked him how long have you been in Taiwan? And he said, so he wanted to say, I have been here for 8 months. So in Mandarin it will be 我来这里8个月了. Then he said 我来这里8月了. Like, he cannot.
Oh my god, the articles, the particles.
Yeah,
and stuff
he
like
really. Like his Chinese,
not very fluent lah.
He was not fluent initially.
Survivable level.
Not even survivable. Like, genuinely god awful. Like, let's just be real, okay? That's his own words, not mine.
Okay.
So yeah, basically he went on to kind of say the differences between certain terms in Taiwan and Singapore. And a lot of people in the comments, he mentioned the word 冲凉 and 洗澡. And it was like a lot of people were commenting in the comments that it is not actually a difference between Singapore and Taiwan, but more of the immigrants, like certain words. So like 调羹 is rooted in Shanghainese. 冲凉 I think is rooted in Cantonese.
Oh.
So, because in different dialects, okay,
they have different ways to say things.
They have different ways of saying
totally
things.
Different.
That sounds totally different.
Yeah.
So it is more like a legacy that has been left behind by the fact that certain like Southeast Asian Chinese people tend to adopt the terms from their ancestors as compared to people from Taiwan who adopt those terms from their ancestors and so on. So yeah, it's a very interesting, very subtle differences, honestly. And like Taiwanese people say 垃圾 instead of
I don't understand.
I don't understand that. I don't understand that for the life of me.
You know the 有边读边thing, 色 and 鸡 do not look like each other. So okay, in Chinese oral exams, there's this strategy. If you can't read the word, you read half of it. Yeah, so like the word 色 and 鸡 really don't look the same.
Yeah, and they sound very different. And yeah, la and le is also very different.
Yeah, but okay, to me, right, I like these little language differences because it shows diversity and it's literally a living legacy to the kind of like history that you're inheriting from your parents or ancestors. So I like it. I just feel like there's no need to correct people on it. Like maybe you can ask them. Yeah. Sometimes I feel like correcting other people just shows that you haven't seen the world enough.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's absolutely true.
That's how I feel.
Yeah. And back on the topic of like northern China versus southern China, I am getting shamed by my co-host here because I don't like to eat coriander. And,
no way! Yes!
And I don't like spring onion.
Okay. Here's the context. Okay, my mom is a bit converted to the northern side because she went to uni there. So my family is kind of northern and we eat in a very 豪放 way. So imagine...
Okay, the northerners, and a bit of context. The idea is that the northern parts of China
a bit more barbaric.
Are a bit more barbaric because of the influence. This is okay, genuine influences, not just bloodline. Like the influences from the nomadic tribes, which are like the Mongolians and the Manchus. If you understand Chinese history, you will understand this.
Yeah.
As compared to the southern China or like more central China, which are historically known to be more
delicate.
The
dialects really to me it sounds more delicate to me. But maybe when they start yelling at each other,
it sounds all the same.
Yeah, just angry Chinese people. Yeah. So in my family, right, I drink vinegar. Full stop. I drink vinegar and I eat raw onion, raw garlic, raw spring onion with 金兰 doesn't like either, raw coriander. Like sometimes when I run out of vegetables, I just put coriander and mincemeat together, then I chop. Wow, it's damn xiang.
I thought you were gonna say that you eat raw sprigs of coriander.
Actually, I could, but why would I? No, but my point being, right, these condiments are so fragrant and nice. But I do know that there's a certain gene that makes people taste...
I'm not that gene, I just don't like the way coriander tastes.
Okay, that's your problem. But okay lah, different people, different tastes. But like, sometimes if you don't like a certain food, you're missing out on all the things that taste good with it. But like, if you can live with that, then never mind. No? So the context was I went to Taiwan, then I tried their coriander ice cream. There's coriander with vanilla ice cream put in a wrap, has peanut flakes on it, and wow, it was fragrant AF. Then I was spazzing about it. Then I was like, I don't eat coriander.
No, it goes back to the whole like so my circle growing up was genuinely like Shanghai, and that's it. It's the whole like why would we learn about other people and go anywhere else? Shanghai is the best.
Yeah.
So like I genuinely did not know that people in China ate raw garlic like as a ate raw garlic until I was, I think, 22 or like last year or something like that.
Wait,
like,
you met me so much earlier.
I didn't see you eat raw garlic. Like, I think we need to like give people some context. They don't take the whole thing of garlic and shove it in their mouth. What they do is they peel like cloves of garlic and they
chew on the garlic cloves.
They take a garlic clove, they will take a bite of their food, typically like noodles. Another thing, like northern China normally eats more noodles and
more flour. Southern more grain.
So they will take a bite of their noodles and then take a bite of like the raw garlic clove.
So
and that is so traumatizing to me because
it's very spicy, but
it is very, very spicy. Like
very nice.
Yeah, and that's, I don't know, I just never thought of doing that.
Oh wait, how about spicy food? What's your tolerance?
Oh, okay. I've built a better tolerance over the years. But if you know Shanghainese cuisine, it's summarized in 4 words, 浓油赤酱, which basically means like heavy on the oil and very thick gravy and like thick sauces. So they tend to be a lot of like thick glazes that are made out of soy sauce and sugar. So basically, it's like, okay, if you imagine Korean food, there's like there's a gochujang flavor that kind of underlies every single dish. For Shanghainese food, there is that same kind of soy sauce.
Is the tangsu paigu taste, is it?
Something like that. That is like, you know, hong shao rou.
But hong shao rou but sweet.
A little bit sweeter, but not extremely sweeter, but like, you know,
I remember
there are other parts of Jiangsu province that is sweeter, like Wuxi is like a lot sweeter.
Wuxi paigu. I have cravings now.
So we don't really eat a lot of spicy food, but nowadays with the rising popularity of hot pot and everything, you just everything. Oh my god, mala is not even Chinese.
It's not.
Singaporean mala is not even Chinese.
Yeah, it's not.
We will get to that someday, but yes, I think it is. We have covered pretty much everything we want to cover for this episode.
Oh really? Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, and we're definitely running over time. So thank you very much for tuning in for the first episode. Would you like to give us any concluding remarks?
We hope you learn a bit more about us and it piques your interest for our future episode. Like, comment, share, subscribe on all our socials down below. That's what the influencers think.
And yes, we will see you hopefully in the next episode.
Yeah.
Bye!